The river is lower this year than anyone alive can remember it. You're standing on its bank roughly 13,000 years ago, somewhere along the Nile. The fish that used to crowd these shallows every season are thinner now, fewer, harder to find. Your group has fished this stretch for as long as anyone can recall. So has the next group upstream. For years, that was never a problem. There was always enough water, enough fish, enough land between you to make sharing feel less like sharing and more like coincidence. That's not true anymore. And everyone on both sides of that shrinking river already knows it, even if nobody has said it out loud yet. Then one morning, somebody says it with a spear instead. You don't hear it coming. Nobody ever does. A hunting party from the group upstream crosses onto ground your people have always considered theirs, and this time nobody backs away first. It's over quickly, the way these things usually are. But quickly doesn't mean small. People you've known your entire life are lying in the reeds when it's finished, and the people who did it aren't strangers from some distant, unknowable place. You've traded tools with some of them. You may be related to a few. That's what makes this different from every fight your ancestors told stories about. This isn't war against the unknown. This is violence between people who used to share everything, now killing each other over what's left of it. That single morning didn't end anything. It repeated, season after season, for years, maybe generations, in a slow, grinding cycle nobody living through it could see the shape of yet. Now fast forward roughly 13,000 years. In 1964, archaeologists working along that same stretch of the Nile in northern Sudan opened a burial ground that had sat quietly under the sand for all that time. Inside were more than 5 dozen skeletons, men, women, children, and scattered among their bones, still lodged in ribs and skulls after 13 millennia, were the exact stone points that had killed them. Archaeologists would name the site Jebel Sahaba, and it now holds a title nobody really wants to hold. It may be the oldest solid evidence of organized human-on-human violence ever found. Here's the question worth sitting with as the evidence unfolds. If war usually needs an enemy, a stranger, someone different enough to hate, what happens when the fighting starts before humans even had strangers at all? Keep that question running. The bones are about to start answering it. The first thing that struck researchers wasn't just that these people died violently. It's that the weapons involved matched what these communities were already making for themselves every day. Whoever killed them wasn't unfamiliar with their way of life. In many cases, it looks like the killers lived almost exactly like they did. Same tools, same territory, same river. The next detail took longer to notice, and it changes everything about how this story reads. Several skeletons carry healed fractures sitting right alongside the fatal wounds. Older injuries that had time to mend before the final one that didn't. That's not the signature of a single afternoon of chaos. That's the signature of a pattern, stretching across years, maybe across generations. Groups clashing, retreating, healing, and clashing again. Some researchers now describe Jebel Sahaba less like a war in the modern sense, and more like a blood feud, passed down and repeated between the same overlapping communities for longer than anyone at the time could have understood while it was happening to them. And the reason behind it, once you dig into the layer of evidence beneath the bones themselves, turns out to be almost mundane. Around the time these people were dying, the climate along the Nile was shifting, drier, harsher, squeezing the fertile land everyone depended on into a smaller and smaller strip. Fish, plants, grazing animals that had once supported scattered groups comfortably now had to support the same number of people on considerably less. This is the detail that keeps resurfacing at nearly every site like this one, across completely different times and places. It's almost never abundance that turns people against their own. It's scarcity, arriving slowly enough that nobody quite notices the exact moment cooperation quietly turns into competition. Roughly 10,000 years later, and a continent away, a second discovery confirmed this wasn't some strange one-time event. At Nataruk, near a long-vanished lagoon in what's now northern Kenya, archaeologists found the remains of at least 27 people. Several showed unmistakable marks of violent death, blunt trauma to the skull, and in at least one case, a projectile point still lodged in the bone. But this site added a detail Jebel Sahaba hadn't shown quite so clearly. Some of the victims appear to have been bound before they died. This wasn't chaos. It looked planned, carried out by people who already knew exactly what they were about to do to people they very likely already knew. Put those two sites side by side, separated by thousands of years and thousands of miles, and a genuinely uncomfortable pattern comes into focus. Long before agriculture, long before cities, long before kings or borders or anything resembling a nation worth defending, humans were already capable of turning violently against people from their own world. Not distant invaders encountered for the first time on a battlefield, neighbors, rivals drawing from the same shrinking river, the same dwindling herd, the same patch of land that used to be big enough for everyone and quietly stopped being big enough for anyone. This is where the idea of a civil war, in its rawest and oldest possible form, actually starts to take shape. Not armies and capitals and rebellions against a throne, but something far more basic. The moment a shared resource stops being shared shared, and a group that once cooperated to survive starts fracturing along whatever lines happen to be nearest at hand. It's tempting to imagine early humans living in some kind of untouched harmony before civilization supposedly ruined everything. But Jebel Sahaba and Nataruk don't really support that story. What they suggest instead is something a little less comfortable and a lot more human, that the instinct to defend what's yours, even against people who used to be yours too, isn't something civilization invented. Civilization just gave that same old instinct better weapons, bigger stakes, and a name to call it by afterward. So return to the question we opened with, standing on that riverbank. What happens when the fighting starts before humans even had strangers to fight? The answer sitting in the sand along the Nile and buried near a vanished lagoon in Kenya is the same answer, repeated in two different places, thousands of years apart. You don't need a stranger to start a war. You just need two groups who used to share everything, watching the thing they shared start to run out. The bones don't say who started it. They never do. They just say it happened, more than once, long before anyone was there to write it down.